So throughout my life, I've realized that money was one of the most important things to me. Even at an early age, I would love to go in front of the church and count the money with my uncle, who was the treasurer of our small little church. And in that time, I began to develop an affection and a love just to the touch and feel of money. It was so important to me. It was so critical piece of my life. And everything around me, even though my mom and dad and my family were followers of Christ, I had never heard of the concept of God's ownership. I've probably been tithing since I was 5 years old. But as I've, over the journey of my life, have started to look and search out the scriptures, especially over the last 15 years, and realizing the Bible has more to say about this topic, topically, than anything else. There's 2,350 verses in the Bible that deal with money and possessions. And the issue is, I'm a Christian who has no idea what it talks about. I've never looked at it. Until the age of 30, I didn't even realize that God owned everything. As I began examining God's Word, I was looking just a few years ago at this passage and keep coming back to it in Matthew 6, verse 19, and he's talking about here, he says, don't store for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust destroy. Store for yourselves treasures not here on this earth, but in His kingdom. And later in verse 22, he says that the eye is a lamp of the body, and a good eye lets in light, a bad eye doesn't let light in. And if the light you think you have isn't really the true light, if it's really darkness, how deep will that darkness be? And then he says in verse 24, you can't serve two masters. You're going to love one, be devoted to the other, despise one, hate the other, or love the other. You can't serve both God and money. And so as I examine this passage, I stop in the middle and I think, man, is Jesus ADD? Because he was talking about money and possessions. And then he starts talking about anatomy, the eye. And as I've examined this closer in my own heart, I felt the Lord just encourage me one day, Dan, if the majority of your decisions are based in money, if it's the root of the basis, if money is the basis of my decision, then really it is my master, because it tells me where to go, what to do, when to buy, when to sell. As I was meditating on this one time, the Lord had me even hold a dollar bill up in front of my eyes, in my office in the light, and I could see that a dollar bill is translucent. It means that light passes through it. And even though it has light coming through, if I had this affixed to my face the rest of my life, and the light that's coming through, if I thought that was the real true light, I would be in trouble. I would stumble and fall if this was affixed to my eyes the rest of my life. Now, physically, that might not happen. But I think spiritually, the majority of life it has. Because the majority of my decisions are really trying to look through this lens. I'm not looking through the owner's lens. And I'm saying, God, I want to hear your voice. God, I want to see you at work. And he says, Dan, I would love to, but I'm not going to push my way through the filter. These filters you have, you've got to lay them down and surrender them and say, I don't want to look through these. It's a daily surrender. That's why in Luke 14, Jesus talks about that this is an issue, really a core issue of discipleship. He says that no one can be my disciple unless he gives up or surrenders essentially all that he has, all of his possessions. In verse 33, he's telling us this is a criteria of being a disciple of Jesus Christ. I've wanted to be a disciple my whole life. I said, God, I want to follow you. I want to do it your way. But there's something, and even as the rich young ruler and others have found out throughout the New Testament, Jesus speaks on this topic more than anything else, more than in heaven, hell, salvation. And it wasn't because he cared about money. It's because he cared about you and I. And he knew that money was going to be something that would separate us from him. So here's the issue. If the light that we think we have is that I really think I love Jesus, but really my real love, and Jesus says I can't love two things. If the money decides and tells me where to go in life, really it's the master of my life. And I believe Jesus wants us to see clearly. And so our desire through this series of looking through the owner's lens, what would happen if we really started to see things as God sees it? What if we saw the money that he gave to us not as something that we put our hope and security and trust in, but something that we look to him to provide for us, trust in what he's provided, and use it then for his purposes and his glory. I hope you'll join me as we continue to search and seek out what God's word says about looking through his lens towards the things that he's entrusted to us.